We'd like to thank you for joining us today for this webinar entitled Expanding Technical Documentation Capabilities in a Post-COVID World. This webinar is brought to you by JANA Inc. and JANA Life Sciences. Your presenters today will be Ron Nyland, President of JANA Life Sciences, and Don Bridges, Manager of Consulting for JANA Inc. I will let them introduce themselves to you in a moment, but first, a little bit of housekeeping. My name is Scott Anderson, and I'm the Marketing Manager at JANA, and I'll be running things behind the scenes here and be popping my head in from time to time. All attendee lines are on mute, so if you have any questions for me or questions for the presenters during the webinar, especially for the Q&A period, please do submit those via the chat function. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat throughout the webinar. The webinar itself will run about 35 minutes, and we've set aside about 10 minutes at the end of that for a Q&A session with Don and Ron, our two industry experts. If you have any questions that you'd like to present to Ron or Don, both, during the Q&A session, again, please submit those via the chat function, and we'll have those guys answer as many as we can during that time. If you have questions that you'd like to ask offline, both Ron and Don will have their email addresses available to you at the end of the webinar. We will be recording this webinar, and we'll be posting it on our website at janacorp.com/webinars. Once it's up and available, we'll send out an email to all attendees with a link to access the webinar, along with any of the other webinars from our library. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the microphone over to Ron Nyland and let our two hosts introduce themselves. Ron, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself first? And by the way, where are you joining us from?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm joining you from the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm out here in Northern California, where I relocated back in 2006. And we're about 45 minutes outside of San Francisco, equidistant from the Silicon Valley area. Yeah, so to start off, I'd appreciate just giving everyone an overview of my background, my bio, if you will. But before doing so, I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us. We at JANA really appreciate it. We understand these are very trying times, and we understand your time is very valuable. So we thank you for giving us your time, your focus here with regards to this subject matter. And we hope you find it to be informative, and we'll follow up, as Scott said, with a link to the webinar, as well as a related, if you will, white paper associated with it. So for me, in terms of my career, it's been dedicated exclusively to the life sciences. I started out working with big pharma, if you will, with both J&J and Pfizer, where I worked in their New York headquarters for 9 years in a variety of capacities. But found my sweet spot, if you will, in the area of program management and product development. Back in 2002, I moved to California, originally to Southern California, working with Amgen, where I sort of jokingly say I did my undergraduate in biotech and then did my master's degree in biotech at Genentech, where I then worked for another handful of years, and then subsequently joined Gilead Sciences, also in the Bay Area, and it's a company that's focused very much on antivirals. In those capacities, I've worked not only with small molecules, pharmaceuticals, large molecules, the biotech, but also worked with diagnostics and related devices for administering drugs and for monitoring patients' bodily functions. And I've worked with an array of therapeutic areas, literally over a dozen. Some of the products I've worked with that you might be aware of include Citromax, Diflucan, Herceptin, Enbrel, and Avastin, just to name a handful. I've been certified as a project management professional. I've studied the PMBOK, the project management body of knowledge, and actually taught several dozen people in the PMBOK and helped them to prepare for the PMP exam as well. And I've also been certified as a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. So again, thank you very much for joining us, and I'd like to hand it over then to Don.
Thank you, Ron. My name is Don Bridges, and I'm speaking with you from beautiful Albuquerque in the desert Southwest. I manage JANA's XML consulting business, and basically what that means is helping organizations improve how they internally create, manage, and deliver content. I've been in the XML industry for about 20 years since XML has been a thing. Was in the SGML side of the world for a few years before that, and actually started my career as a flight test engineer for a little company called Pratt & Whitney, and was chasing F-15s and F-16s and YA-7Fs and F-22s and F-23s, seems like all over the country when they were being developed. So anyway, a little bit of hands-on in industry and a lot of bit of working both for JANA in a consulting role and for software companies and those kinds of things. Why don't, one of the things we'd probably be remiss, Scott, can I have you tell the folks about what is JANA?
Happy to. JANA is a 48-year-old company. We specialize in technical writing and engineering and program management, along with XML consulting. We are a third-generation family-owned company. Ron Nyland is actually the nephew of our founder, and our founder is also the father of our current CEO and the grandfather of our current president. His name was Joseph A. Nyland, which is where the name JANA comes from. It was originally Joseph A. Nyland and Associates, and over time just got shortened down to JANA and is officially now just JANA Inc. We have specialties in the area of aerospace and life sciences, and we have our fingers in a lot of technology and manufacturing industries, but we have a lot of expertise outside of those areas as well, and do a lot of technical writing and program management and XML consulting, especially outside of those areas, but we do specialize in aerospace engineering. We have over 100 technical writers and engineers and illustrators and program managers, and we're fit to do business with pretty much anybody. We are headquartered, you can see in this picture here, our two-building headquarters in near San Antonio, Texas. There's actually a building across the street from these two buildings as well. We have a facility in Mexico and other facilities and remote workers sprinkled kind of all throughout North America. So we're well suited and well positioned to help pretty much any company with their technical documentation and engineering needs. Ron?
Thank you, Scott. So the name of the title of the webinar is Expanding Technical Documentation Capabilities in a Post-COVID World. You look at what's going on this year, and wow, what a year it's been. A year ago, if I'd said coronavirus, you'd have no idea what I was talking about, probably. And now, boy, it's a word that I think I'll be happy to forget, and have gone through a what looked like a first wave and maybe a second wave, but it has really turned the world upside down. Not only from our day-to-day lives, but it's also turned the financial world upside down. If you look at what the market did back in early March or late February, it took a relatively precipitous dive from roughly about a third and has managed to climb back up. But what the market's going to be doing as we go forward, anybody's guess. Maybe the election will make it better, maybe the election will make it worse, who knows? But certainly these are very tumultuous times, very stressful times. What's going to happen with the economy going forward, who knows? It's I could probably make you an argument that things will be better, and I could probably make you an argument that things will be worse. On top of that, there are life stresses. Everyone is social distancing and wearing a mask in public, and certainly in most places, certainly here in New Mexico. And on top of that, we're finding new ways to go work, and invariably that has been working remotely, and things like Zoom meetings and Microsoft Teams and GoToMeetings. Yeah, we may have used those in the past, but they've become kind of a daily part of most of our lives. And one of the byproducts of that is that collaboration can be more difficult. Now, thank goodness we've got those tools to go use, but collaboration is certainly, it's a little bit tougher. And back a year ago, if you had a question for somebody and you knew who you had to go ask, you would say, hey, let's go meet in this conference room, or let me come over by your desk and talk about this, that, or what you need to discuss. That's a lot harder when everybody is working remote, or the key people are working remote. On top of that, new product documentation, we see it has become harder, in that there's organizational knowledge that is required. You know, you have relationships with the people that are developing the product, with the engineering staff, with the regulatory staff, with the subject matter experts. And if you don't know who the subject matter experts are, it has become much harder to go engage with those folks. So I mentioned a little bit that where a lot of us have been and are maybe working still remotely. Believe it or not, there is something called the Remote Work Association, and they took a survey and said, hey, about 18% of the workforce was working from home. During the pandemic, that climbed up to 56%, and I would expect that over the March, April, May timeframe, it was every bit of 56%. Very few people were going into work, and mostly that was manufacturing, or the factory that was going into work, and the rest of us were not. And then even after the pandemic, I still think there's going to be a significant number of people that are working from home. You know, anywhere between a fourth and a third of your workforce is going to be working home, and I expect white collar workers are going to disproportionately affect that. People that would be doing content strategy and training development and technical information development, I suspect those people are much more likely. And for those groups, I haven't seen the numbers, but I would suspect it's more than 28%. So why would you consider outsourcing against that backdrop? And there's a couple of really good reasons. One is a technology transition. If you move from, let's call it a word processor format to a XML-based format. Yep, that would certainly qualify for one. Maybe you have variable WIP, or work in process, and just the workload goes up and down, and okay, how do you go manage that? And another one is that you're in a catch-up mode, that you kind of, for whatever reason, got behind. You have this significant backlog of content that needs to be updated, and you don't have the staff to go do it. So in a perfect world, this is what your workload looks like versus time. And boy, I wish I lived in this world. I'm sure you wish you lived in this world, but the reality is probably none of us live in this world. We live in this world where, yes, there are peaks, and yes, there are valleys. And do you go staff based on the peaks, and then have a lot of people sitting around with little to do during the valley? Do you staff for the valleys, and then you're overwhelmed when the peaks come along? Do you try and split the difference and say, yep, sometimes we're going to be all hands on deck, and other times, it's going to be a little bit slower. So I think you really have to go look at things, and maybe Ron, you can share some thoughts about when does outsourcing make sense to your organization? When might it make sense to your organization? Ron?
Thanks, Don. Yeah, so now that we have some understanding as to reasons why one might consider outsourcing, let's shine some light on when outsourcing might make sense. Obviously, internal constraints, resources are one of the primary issues. And this could come from several different angles. One is just the budget. So in this current state with COVID, companies are seemingly tracking very differently their budgets and managing to shorter timeframes than previously. And so you may have significant budgetary constraints that you're facing that prevent you from increasing your resources. At the same time, you may not be able to hire. You know, hiring today, this whole process has been sort of turned upside down, but especially around hiring. So trying to interview candidates in a remote fashion is very different. And even in some cases, it's very difficult still to get highly qualified candidates. Areas such as, let's say, QA, quality assurance within medical devices seemingly is one area where, but especially because of a lot of focus on COVID and COVID-related equipment, there are constraints that companies are facing. There could be a large work volume that you're facing, as Don alluded to, with those ebbs and flows. But what we noticed in the first half of the year was a lot of projects were backburnered. That didn't mean the work went away. It was just sort of pushed to the background. And suddenly companies may be facing the fourth quarter here and asking themselves, well, where were we going with that particular project? And there may be sort of timelines that are predicated on doing some work in the course of the balance of the year. And so you might suddenly find yourself with a very aggressive schedule that you need to meet. Team efficiency, as Don alluded to, absolutely is a factor where it's been compromised. People are perhaps becoming more productive, but there is ramping up in terms of understanding how to manage something like technical documentation in a remote fashion. And for some, that process is easier to manage than others. The aspect of the team focusing on innovative aspects could mean that you're getting resources pulled away from projects that you would be supporting, and where you've got to basically go where the innovation is and support that, but it may leave you sort of holding the bag, as it were, with some of your more established older projects that need continuous documentation updates. And then with regards to technology, process, and training, these are areas where, for sure, there could be issues. When it comes to technology, the aspect of state-of-the-art, virtual reality kinds of technical documentation, that requires not only technology, but again, going back to very specialized personnel that may preclude you from doing the work yourself and needing to outsource. The aspect of process and lacking perhaps an ISO certified environment may be a factor why you might choose to outsource, so as to give your product ultimately more credibility going before regulatory bodies and customers. And then training issues may factor in. For instance, something like simplified technical English may be a requisite for your technical documentation, and yet you may not have that internal capacity. And then the question is, do you try to develop it internally, or might it make more sense to outsource that particular work? So, having said that, and then shifting to the next aspect here of what services might be better suited for outsourcing. At the top of our list, anyway, is the aspect of translations. And this may come into play, but especially when it comes to procedural documentation, the idea of policies, SOPs, work instructions, enabling documents, templates, and forms. In companies that are resource constrained, they may be doing sort of that primary set in English, but then they may need translations at the country level and conceivably for dozens of countries. And the fact of the matter is, when you do that, there's an exponential increase in work because the channels of communication suddenly increase exponentially. And so that formula for understanding channels of communication, taking the number of parties, n times n-1 over 2, if you had 10 parties, then it's 10 times 9 over 2, you've got 45 channels of communication. And so you could see how very quickly that number can rise. And it could make it very difficult for someone just to manage from a communication perspective alone. Another aspect in terms of services that may be better suited for outsourcing relates to just informational development at large. So when it comes to writing, it may be such that you've got writers and they're capable, but from an engineering perspective. And so maybe they're not the better suited party to do something that may be ultimately needed for your audience. The aspect of illustrations could be yet another component. And here it's part art and part science. And the idea of doing repeated illustrations obviously helps one to become more efficient. And yet, if in your group you don't do a lot of illustrations, you may never develop that efficiency. Video is sort of an extension to this. And I guess while illustrations are or a different animal. Videos are an altogether different beast, because suddenly you've got movement to take into place. And yet there's significant value inherent in having that kind of an offering. Extending this further is the aspect of augmented reality and virtual reality. So these elements sort of fall under the aspect of training development as well, where you're in fact putting information right in the hands of a user at the very point in time when they may need it to do a specific task. So things like 3D animation, 3D object overlays, those are some aspects that sort of blend in here that, again, may cause you to consider outsourcing. Content assessments and content strategy are the last two areas. And the fact of the matter is, if you're working with another company and outsourcing this, you may get some benefits that you might not consider at first glance. One of those could be their understanding what's happening in the industry and what are deemed to be some better or perhaps even best practices here. So, having looked at these services that might be suited for outsourcing, let's now focus on the aspect of timing. So then the question is, okay, ramping up with a vendor, that takes time. But then the question is, how much time? And it really depends. It depends on the complexity of the project, the scope of the project, your internal resources. For instance, your procurement group, your strategic resourcing group, they may have constraints that say, hey, you've got to start getting this ball rolling 3 months in advance so that we can do the appropriate diligence around the vendors. And here's where they need to think about things that you may not be thinking of at first glance. Again, the aspects of insurance, getting bona fide references, seeing samples of work. The aspects that one also needs to consider here relate to the technology. What equipment will the vendor be using? Whose hardware? And what are the protocols around using that hardware? What procedures will you be using? Going back to the aspect of SOPs, your company may in fact have SOPs and the vendor may have SOPs. And then the question is, well, whose procedures do we follow when doing certain parts, if you will, of the processes to support the project? Understanding how that company is then working with work packages and their quality management system, those are things that you'll need to think about. That will help you to understand how much time it will take for a project to go through, and getting that appreciation for their throughput is something that you need to think about sooner than later to build effectively the right kind of expectations on the project. And then reporting requirements. You need to ask yourself, what does a report or reports look, what do they look like? What's the frequency of issuance? Who are the drivers of production? Who are those that are viewing and weighing in on components of the report? For instance, if you're doing a red, yellow, green light, who's to say what is yellow? So these are some things that one needs to think about, again, when it comes to outsourcing information development services. So let me hand it now back to Don, and he's going to discuss the options for expanding your business capabilities.
Thank you, Ron. So if you say, I'm a little behind, I need to go add some horsepower, add some writers, developers, translation capability internally, you may want to say, what are the options? And there's really four. One is saying I can go hire full-time staff, and certainly that's a viable option. You have to manage them, but it's okay, it's your staff. Another option that we see is that people will hire temporary or freelance personnel that will write on your behalf for a finite amount of time. And okay, that's an option. You may want to go outsource, and a lot of the webinar beyond this point will talk about, okay, if you want to go down and look at that outsource option, what's involved there? And you may want to take a hybrid approach, meaning let's go combine. I may need one additional staff person, but then I'm going to outsource some of it, or I'm going to need a freelance person and I'll hire that in addition to a full-time staff. So these are really the four options. and to kind of map things out as far as, if you compare hiring more resources, hiring freelancers, or outsourcing content, how does that, does that have an effect on overhead? Certainly, in physical space. And as Ron talked about, computers and software and training. And, oh, by the way, when you hit an ebb, and certainly at some point you more than likely will hit an ebb, am I going to have to go lay this person off, which is never a fun experience. So here's kind of what this shows is that when you hire internal resources, you have to go provide for all these things. When you outsource, you essentially provide none of these things, and freelancers is a mixed bag, some yes, some no. So you looked at your options and you said, let's go take a closer look at outsourcing. Ron, based on your experience in industry and working with this kind of material, maybe you can give us some insights on how do you find the right vendor, and what does the right vendor look like?
Sure, thanks, Don. Yeah, so very often there tends to be, if you will, a focus on the project at hand and the cost for that project and the timing. And I think, as a company, our feeling is the aspect of partnership really needs to be sort of there at the fore, if you will. Presuming you have a successful project and presuming it's managed to a high degree of quality and with a reasonable price, in the optimal world, you found the right person, the partner to go forward with. So our feeling is when it comes to the right vendor, they are helping to deliver savings to you for sure. They're looking at incurring savings at the task and work package level, but at the same time helping you to better design your ultimate offering for your end customers, those users. And in doing so, hopefully they're helping you to streamline processes and procedures and realize benefits and savings in that process. The right vendor is there to really understand your needs, not just in the short term, but the mid and long term. And they should really be focused on doing the right thing, meaning getting the project at hand completed while keeping your mid and long term interests at mind. It's not about the quick fix, right? Here's where you want to make sure you're picking the right partner. And the fact of the matter is, the right partner is going to be in tune with the pulse of your organization. They really should have an understanding of your goals, your priorities, and your constraints. And they should be working with you and helping to flesh out scenarios that seemingly are sort of the optimal case, the base case, and the pessimistic, if you will, case. They need to be flexible, and they need to be able to expand in the event you have this optimal case where suddenly you are perhaps pursuing more projects than you thought in, let's say, the event where purse strings on a budget were loosened. The right vendor then invariably becomes a strategic partner with you, and they're presuming two things. They bring tactical mastery, and they're bringing an understanding of your business. At the end of the day, the right vendor can help you make your product more usable, more attractive, and better for your end customers and users. At the same time, they have the capacity to help relieve stresses on your organization and individuals in your technical writing groups, and including managers. The fact of the matter is, in this here and now, statistics will show 30 to 40% of the people in the US are suffering from depression, anxiety, and stress. And no doubt this is adversely impacting the way we're doing business, and that we could do better. So we need to think about how do we reduce these stresses. And at the same time, not having the right vendor, unfortunately, could make all of these things very different and perhaps even worse. So now, what about finding that perfect vendor? What does that entail? The fact is, you need to think first and foremost about the scope of your project. And then as you narrow it down, you need to think about what you do best as a company and where you think you could use bench strength and depth. You need to determine what vendor does the different elements for your project mix and end up being very complementary to your team. In doing so, you need to develop, obviously, a very thorough RFP. Here's where, if you haven't done it before, or if you'd like support, Jana is definitely willing to provide assistance toward that end. But again, you really need to start this ball rolling a little bit sooner with certain groups in your company, just to make sure everyone's aligned, i.e. your procurement group, strategic resourcing group. You need to think about then too, what are the must-haves versus nice-to-haves, and build that into your scope, into your documentation plan, build it into your project timeline. You need to assess your vendors very carefully. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but the fact of the matter is, when you do your due diligence, you really need to kick those tires well. You need to solicit references. You need to look at the history of the company. And the fact of the matter is, you've got an RFP that really should be very comprehensive at the end of the day, to let your vendors know what your program or project looks like, what are the components of it, and what are the components specifically that they need to address in responding to you. Sometimes it does help to give a little bit more broader context information if you've got a sub-project to a larger, perhaps, program. Next, we'll focus on what you should do or should be on the lookout for when it comes to selecting a vendor. So, as mentioned, company history and references are two elements. The aspect of industry focus, they should know your industry, perhaps not as well as you, but in some cases, maybe they do. They need to have personnel and business practices that are aligned with you, with your needs, and also your personnel styles, work manners, and practices. They have to definitely understand them and appreciate them, so they know when to give and take, sort of to flex in this process. They, in this COVID-19 world, really need to know what it means to work remotely with minimal supervision, because the fact of the matter is 56%, I think, is the figure Don had mentioned, if not more, but especially in areas like life sciences, are working remotely. You need to have the utmost confidence that that person is a bona fide professional and is highly responsible, and that they and their organization have a real focus on quality. Meaning, not only do they have the certifications like ISO certifications, but they've got a true quality management system, and they understand what it means to parse out work into work packages and to track them, because that is so necessary for you to then develop your reports and then to develop your associated KPIs and really keep your finger on the pulse, but especially in the early days with a vendor. So I did mention the cultural fit. The last thing I would say is you need to think too about geography, because you don't want to throw yet one more confounder into the mix, and in the ideal world, everyone's in the same time zone. But time zone can be a very powerful factor if people are there during your business day to answer the phone and to work on work packages in that current day, as opposed to having a 24 or 12 or 24-hour lag. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Don, and he'll lead us through the creation of an RFP.
Thank you, Ron. Ron has mentioned a couple times, and I think I've mentioned a couple times, that an RFP, or request for proposal, is a very good idea to get quality responses back from potential vendor partners. And good components, necessary components, are things like content strategy. How do you want to see this project go together? How are you going to manage it? What is the scope? Where do you see it going in the future? And KPIs, or key performance indicators. How are we going to measure things to make sure that they stay on track? The vendor, if things go well and if prompted to, will provide you things like, what is their viability to go meet your requirements? How are they adding value? How are they managing their people? What are the pricing models that that they use? What is the staffing model that they're going to follow? Can they provide you references And this goes into the viability aspects of it. And do they agree with your KPIs? Are there others that might be considered? And how are there KPIs that maybe you didn't consider that they can say, hey, in addition to this, or maybe instead of the ways that you had suggested, here's some that we have seen. And so you'll kind of grow your knowledge base. And at some point, when you are ready to start going forward, you're going to need a transition plan that you should both be involved with. You should both have eyes wide open and be in alignment that, hey, we understand what is the plan, what is the schedule, and from an IT perspective, what is the system access? I would expect that all of your content right now lives behind a firewall. How's the vendor going to be able to go collect that data and revise it and save it? Those are things that you need to discuss. So one of the things that might be helpful is this kind of checklist that says, these are things that may be important. You need to go select the items that are important to you. And Ron has talked on most of them as far as the alignment and being big enough to respond, not just a one or two person shop and, oh, I'm sorry, gosh, I'm busy on something else. Do they have experience with your data models, your data format? What are their processes? What are their references? What are the things that you will use to go say, these are how we're going to go score things. So once you've selected a vendor, congratulations, now the hard work begins. You have to go develop a documentation plan. And this is basically, here's how we're going to be providing you information. Here's what's expected of you. Here's the standards that you need to follow. Here's our style guide, if you have a style guide. Things like that go into a documentation plan. Of course, you're going to have stakeholders on your side. The vendor's going to have stakeholders on their side. I cannot emphasize enough how communication is really critical. The vendor more than likely may need to go access your subject matter experts so that they can say, hey, I don't understand this. Help me understand this. And so there will be an interaction between the vendor and the subject matter experts. I've mentioned that there is invariably a project schedule, a project timeline. You'll need to have eyes wide open and say, hey, here's not best case, here's not worst case, here's reality. And update that. It's a living document. So the schedule is not, let's go create it once and I never have to look at it again. It's how are we doing? Are we keeping the schedule? Do I need to go change the schedule? Can I change the schedule? How do you approach it? How do you go build a process to go transfer information back and forth, saying, well, I'm just going to send them the information and expect magically in a month it's all going to come back? It probably doesn't work that way. So I've talked a little bit about key performance indicators. And what is a key performance indicator? And it's basically metrics that are used to go measure how is the vendor performing. We've broken these down into two categories, and there's others. There's customer support metrics that we could get into if you really wanted to. And if you have a question about what's a customer support metric, hit me up in the chat. But productivity metrics are things like how many hours does it take to go complete a work package on average? Yeah, you're going to have big ones and you're going to have smaller ones. You'll come up with nominally it's this many hours to go complete the work on it. What is the backlog? If you were behind and are trying to work down that backlog, how are we doing on that backlog? What is the cycle time for documents? What is the cycle time for change requests? Productivity measures. How is the company doing from a content in, content out perspective? There's also quality metrics. And if the quality, as Ron said, it's not something that is just applied at the end, it's something that has to be baked into the entire process. And that's things like defect rates. If you care about things like reading comprehension level, there's ways to go measure that. There's style guides, and I've mentioned one of them, Simplified Technical English, but there are others. There's the Chicago Book of Style. There's a Microsoft Style Guide. You may have your own style guide. How well does the content that you get back meet that style guide? And oh, by the way, there are ways to go measure that automatically. And the writer gets real-time feedback of saying, hey, I am conforming at 80%, 90%, 100% to the style guide that we've agreed upon. Am I consistent in the narrative style? Am I consistent in the terminology? So All things that go into saying, is the vendor giving me good value for the money? Another thing that you're going to have to look at is what is the model to apply the right resources to the right content. This is one that we've seen work very, very well, and it's based on product maturity. And what that means is the brand new stuff, the shiny new technology, key new components, mission critical, future of the company. Have your staff work on that. That's the exciting stuff. That's the fun, neat stuff. They're going to have to know the people that are the subject matter experts, and they probably, if they were working before COVID, they probably have those relationships with your SMEs, and it will go much better. The other extreme of that is the boring, mundane sustainment of work for existing products. And boy, your staff is probably happy to see that taken away because it's boring. And the vendor will say, okay, that's how it goes. I kind of had the perception at Jana that a lot of the work that we do is stuff that our customers say, we'd really rather not do. We have to, but we'd really rather not. And that's perfect. It's generally the engineering packages are self-contained, and it's much more straightforward, and it's much more suited to potentially a remote worker doing the work. A remote worker that's even a vendor. And then you may have this area in the middle that says, okay, I've got existing products, but yeah, we continue to innovate. I continue to build new features. And maybe that's a mix of both the staff and the vendor. So here's one model. There's lots of others. We can discuss them. And the key point is that you need to come up with a model that meets your requirements. So what should you expect from a partnership? And we break it down into 3 areas. One is operational excellence. Are they working in a quality manner, meeting your KPIs? Do they have the capacity? Are they building the environment that is conducive to not only align with you, but to be a good community partner? Is there innovation? As I've mentioned, sometimes, and Ron mentioned, sometimes the vendor is going to say, hey, here's what we've seen at other companies, and might you be interested in that approach? So yes, innovation is, I think, much more achievable when you bring in a fresh set of eyes to say, here's how we've seen other people do it and it works, or, well, we've tried that and it doesn't work and here's why, but let's go forward. And then what is the long-term savings? It's, as Ron had mentioned, invariably outsourcing of technical documentation is not something that you just jump in for a week or a month, but on a long-term process, you want to see where, okay, as they get more familiar with me, as they get more familiar with the process, as they get more familiar with my workflows, cost should go down. The vendor should actually work not cheaper, but faster and better. And I think you can leverage that. So is it all peaches and cream? Does everything just work perfectly all the time like magic? And the answer is no, it doesn't. And oh, by the way, it's not something that you're just going to wake up on a Wednesday morning and go, oh my gosh, things aren't working well. You'll have warning signs. And these are some of the warning signs, whether it's inflexible attitudes, whether it's expectations that are maybe misaligned, whether it's you're measuring KPIs one way, but in reality, we're measuring KPIs a different way. And of course, you get different numbers. So there are warning signs. Heed the warning signs. If you have, any of these issues come up, talk with the vendor and say, hey, we got a problem. Let's go figure out how we go solve it and make it better. And little problems grow up to be big problems. So it's really better to go address them as soon as you see the first warning sign of, hey, something's going on. It's bothering me. Let's go figure out how to go address that. So your start state is where you are now. And boy, if you're looking at outsourcing, the staff may say, oh my gosh, they're going to go outsource my job. Or I'm going to be holding the bag for poor quality content that doesn't hit the mark. And while, yeah, I get those, in reality, I think most writers that certainly that we've worked with looked at it and says, hey, all that boring, mundane stuff, That's off our plate now. We can go focus on that bright, shiny new technology that's the future of the company. So I think the more they realize, okay, this is actually a good thing for me. You're going to have standardized processes. As Ron had mentioned, the vendor is basically going to be an extension of your company, and they're going to work with the processes and workflows that you've mutually agreed upon. And the managers are saying, yep, I've got my internal team I need to go manage, but I'm working with this external vendor that, yeah, they're going to go manage the people, but I have to go manage the business. So that's where you want to get to in an in-state relationship. So can a vendor be a valued partner? And we think the answer is yes, but it's not just yes because I said so. It's yes because you planned, you know what the model is, you prepared for this engagement, you selected the right vendor very carefully. You had an RFP that says, hey, here's the information I need to go help me make a good decision, and you followed through that process. You're managing it. You'll hear from us time and time again, communication is critical, and you have to go manage it instead of throwing content over a wall and expecting miraculously it's going to come back just the way that you want it. And finally, you have to nurture it. Vendors are an extension of your team, and communication is critical. So it's very much a continuation, a paradigm shift that says, okay, I can do this, but it requires some things. These are those some things. So in summary, you're going to have workload fluctuations. It's just the nature of the beast. And before it becomes critical, that's the time when you need to start prepping and saying, okay, let me go get a vendor lined up. I may not ever use them, quite honestly, but I need to have that ace in the hole, for a poker term. You want to have a proven process that has been done over and over and over. It's very much the saying, hey, I know what I'm getting into. My eyes are wide open. This isn't our first rodeo. And finally, most solutions are going to be more efficient as time goes on. They're going to offer lower costs, not because their labor rate is going down, but because they're doing things better and smarter. So with that, I would like to turn things back over to Scott.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. As we mentioned at the top, we have set aside a few minutes for Q&A, and we do have a couple of questions that were submitted. If you guys wouldn't mind taking a crack at these. The first one is, what are some of the most frequent failure points when working with an outsourced vendor?
Ron,
Can I take that one?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, if I can take that one.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I think one of the most frequent failure points is that aspect of scope, and really fleshing out the scope of the project well. And commensurate with that is then understanding the work packages and timing, and building the timeline from the bottom up. So while communication is one aspect, because in today's world, there's a lot different communication happening. And as we live through this, we're starting to realize it's much more asynchronous communication. It's not like the face-to-face real time. Things are a little disconnected. You might email someone and hear back a few hours later, or maybe not until a day later. You may text someone and you don't necessarily hear from them right away either, because they may be caught in stresses. So the quality of communication is really paramount, to focus on quality communication and to create opportunities for synchronous communication as much as possible. For instance, a webinar, ideally, if you can do it with a video as well, so you can see people and put the name to the face and understand that body language that wouldn't necessarily come through otherwise. But yeah, so communication, and then scope, and then timeline would be the three things I would note.
Okay. Do you have anything to add there, Don?
The only thing that comes to mind is that go into this with accurate expectations, and certainly the vendor is responsible for helping set accurate expectations. But I think there can sometimes be a mismatch where, well, I thought they were going to do this. Well, did you tell them? No, but I thought they would. And so maybe that's falls into the communications category, but setting expectations when you're going with a new relationship is always very important.
Absolutely. Thank you. And one additional question. How long does it typically take for an outsourced technical writing project to reach a steady state?
You want to take that one, Don?
Sure.
Okay.
And wow, that's really it's a tough question, a good question, but it's a tough question because there's so many variables. If spooling up 2 or 3 writers is very fast, and I would expect that to happen in a matter of weeks, that they will be running smoothly. Whereas if you're outsourcing a whole larger, I want to go update this huge backlog of content, and I'm going to have half a dozen writers involved doing that. Boy, that can be months in the making to get to smooth. About as long as I've ever seen it take, just because it starts and stops and people not being available, certainly is several months, but that's not completely crazy, but it certainly doesn't happen overnight either. Ron, any thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, for sure. As I think about it, there are 4 elements that come to mind. So first is whether you've got bona fide professionals that work as a team and have that experience base to leverage from. It's very different than reaching out to, let's say, a few disparate writers and asking them to work together versus reaching out to a vendor who's got a team that's sort of been there and done it in a multitude of times. So the professionalism of the team is an element. I think another one is the amount of pre-work that you're, I guess, establishing and information that you're providing to that team. A good team will accept information, and typically they'll say, I'll take all the information you can give me so I can really go through it and understand historical context, get appreciation for perhaps the style of writing and the style guide. So the pre-work is really important. And then I think there's the aspect of the maturity of the team. When I say the team, meaning between the 2 companies, because we all know there's that new team. They go through invariably the storming, forming, norming, high performing phases. And I'm sorry if I transposed one there, but that aspect of getting to a norming state quickly is important, and understanding which state you're in. Once you're in that norming phase, you should be able to, with the professionals at hand, very quickly get to a performing stage. And then shifting into 4th gear, high performing, shouldn't take that professional team all too much longer.